That is a fact.
All right. Welcome to Baseball Biz on Deck. I am Mark Carbon, and with me is the host of the show, Mr. Matt Tremaine. How you doing today, Matt?
I'm full of box scores, Mark.
Uh,
I'm loving every minute of it. We finally have data. We finally get to nerd it up and say, you know what? We know everything that's going to play out in the season because we have one box score for every team.
Are there some? We got all 30 of them played. Is there anybody today that's playing?
There's a half dozen or 8 games today, I think.
Yeah. It's like it's opening. We said opening night day week, whatever it is.
Yep.
That's what it is. But yeah, we finally got data, and I guess Sports Radar sharing that with probably Market and everybody else, and we'll see how that impacts everything. Oh gosh, folks! So glad you're all here on Baseball Biz on Deck with Matt and I, and it's fun because we just actually got off with a friend of ours, Brent Cardy, of the Brent Cardy Show. So you all should check that out. He is a very sharp fella, does a great show and very pithy, but it's a great time there with him. So, Matt, now that the Rays have their first game under their belt, and I guess I could have just waited till the sixth inning to turn the game on, man. It was like, if you're only interested in offense, that was it. Of course, they would have missed Drew, right? I mean, because Drew just pounded it in the first 5 innings. And then Drew Rasmussen, as a pitcher for the Rays, exemplary job, but it ended there.
Yeah, that sixth inning was just something to behold. And what I found out of it was that you couldn't fault any of the moves that Kevin Cash made.
Yeah.
Like he brought in who he was supposed to bring in, right? Ian
Right.
Seymour was supposed to be a very solid choice. That imploded, so he brought in Garrett Clevenger. That imploded, so he brought in Griffin Jax. So like you walk through the whole scenario, and it was just a nightmarish kind of thing for Kevin Cash because he's making all the right moves,
Right.
but none of them are playing out. First game of the season, a rusty pen, whatever you want to call it. It's one of those things where you're not going to write off the season because of the one game. But it is frustrating when you're up 7-1 and you kind of get that deflated feeling thereafter where you lose the game 9-7. You're like, how in the world did that happen in the span of 3 innings?
Yeah, and that's it exactly. It's like, my gosh. I mean, that's just painful. Up that much, and then to see it tick away piece by piece, seeing what Drew put together, and then finding each one of those pitchers having to have not their best day for, hopefully it's the worst day for the year because we don't want to see any of that the rest of this year. But it was disheartening. And it's the Cardinals. I don't know. The expectations for the Cardinals, they're not that great, are they, for this year?
No, but they have some rookies. JJ's one of those guys that is going to be like when you look at the Brendan Donovan trade that they made with the Mariners and the Rays were involved. They got Ben Williamson in that deal. You could almost argue that offensively it could become an upgrade because JJ Weatherholt is supposed to be a pretty elite player, assuming he plays to his potential. So they're not exactly in a full rebuild. I want to say they're kind of remodeling in terms of because they play in a weaker division. Like they're able to, if they stick around long enough and they make the right additions at the deadline, they would still be in play for a potential playoff spot. But I don't think anybody, expects them to do very much.
Right.
The one thing I would say for the Rays as well is their lineup showed up. Like the guys in the lineup, like Ben Williamson had 3 for 4. Carson Williams hit a ball at 110 miles an hour. Johnny DeLuca hit one at 108. Like they had a lot of production at key moments. And so that sixth inning that they put up 6 runs, that was fun. That was nice to see. And it was good to see them get some positive momentum. And hopefully, if they do that more consistently through the season, then they'll get the pitching behind them that can actually help them earn more W's. So I'll take some encouragement on that side, Mark.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that because I mean, it's the thing of seeing how well they were doing offensively out there, and you wonder I didn't pay enough attention because I had other things going on, unfortunately, at the museum. And Jake Fraley, how did he do?
Jake's doing fine. Like he's one of those guys that I expect when he's on the field or when he's in the lineup, he'll be a productive member of the lineup and of the team. You're not expecting him to be a top 20 or top 30 player in the league. But as long as he's a productive piece of the lineup, he's going to be somebody that can actually chip in when he needs to. So he came up off the bench and pinch hit. He got his hit right away, so he's 1 for 1. But he's also one of those guys that will get the majority of his playing time against right-handed pitching. So because Matthew Liberatore was on the mound yesterday, he didn't get the start, but I fully expect him to be in the outfield regularly when they're facing right-handers.
Now you bring up Liberatore because that was interesting. We're looking at a former Rays prospect, and he faced one of our guys. I'm trying to think, was also a prospect, and I thought we had a home run, but it didn't last. Who was at bat? Who was at bat? And the guy was already running the bases, and then I guess it got challenged and it's called a foul. Do you remember
Uh,
that play?
I didn't see that one actually,
Yeah.
so I
That's
can't
a-
call it. But I know Rhonda hit one off of him in the fifth inning, and it was an easy, sweet swing on the ball that was a little bit outside and down, and Rhonda just went and got it and popped it over. But I think the the lineup in general looked really good. Like they had good at bats. They weren't looking lost. Now, the one contentious change that Kevin Cash did make was, like I said, Ben Williamson was 3 for 4.
Mhm.
And they were in a key moment with the bases loaded, and he took him out and brought in Richie Palacios.
Mhm.
Why you would do that and bring a cold bat in, I have no idea. Like I would have left Ben Williamson in. He's a much better contact guy. And I feel like that was one moment where they might have been able to tie the game. So it's the one, yeah, I don't want to call it a criticism, but it's one thing that they might have done different that would have changed the outcome of the game. So the more worrisome aspects that I saw were Junior Caminero's defense at third. You know, we were just on the Brent Cardy show, and he was asking where is Junior Caminero going to end up playing? If you're dealing Yandy Diaz, do you end up eventually moving Junior Caminero to first base the same way the Jays did with Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? I saw a lot of potential in Junior Caminero at third base last year because, I even had a conversation with JJ Cooper online where I was like, you know what? Like he looked like a plus defender at third base the second half of the season. He worked really hard on it. So I'm not going to judge him based on the one game and the two errors, but I'm going to pay attention to it for the first half of the season and say, you know what? If he struggles enough between now and, like Brent said, if they deal Yandy Diaz,
Right.
opens up that possibility, then yeah, I could see the Rays, digging into that because they do have other guys who could fit in really well. I mentioned Braden Taylor. I mentioned, Carson Williams. If Taylor Walls comes back, he could shift over to third. He has the arm for it. So there's other guys that they could put at the position if needed, including Ben Williamson. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like the Rays are feeling out a lot of players and seeing how they're going to fit long term.
So those kind of things I thought we probably had done during spring training, though. But hey, it's the first game, right? We got 161 more to play, so can't be too critical. I said it on the Cardi show, and I'll say it here. I was absolutely adored seeing Yandy go for it after hitting that ball right at the beginning of the game and sliding into first. I said, yes, that's the excitement we want in baseball. Come on, give me some more. And that I did because y'all were talking about him being gone after half the season, and it's probable, and that'll be a shame. I mean, we've had players we want to see. Longoria was the one once upon a time, and certainly Brandon Lau was this year. And you say, gosh Almighty, and then. Well, there's other players. I'm not going to bring them up now that are still on the team that you and I were like, hey, come on, really? But they got to make their deals. We'll see how they all play out. I am excited about the Trop, though. Like I said, I'm not going to the first game because I can't afford a ticket, but I am excited about it reopening, and we'll see how long we're going to be there because there's a lot of questions we know when it comes to the stadium. And we mentioned some of this on Brent's show, but we see that the possibility of a situation much like over in St. Petersburg is about to evolve again right here. And some of that was a lack of communication. Some of it was the expectations were high. Sometimes one party, whether it would be the city of St. Pete, would say one thing, and then the Rays would come out and say, I don't remember that. I don't know. So we'll have to see here, Matt. I mean, you've seen the numbers. I mean, we're talking about basically at least putting up $1.5 billion from the city or county to play this game, and we've already given them 32 acres. So I don't know. We'll have to watch how it plays. But I'm going down a road I don't need to go. The one thing I need to say is I'm glad that we're going to be back in the Trop.
Yeah, like so let's set the stage. We're going into 2026. We were worried at one point in time that St. Petersburg wasn't going to renovate the Trop at all, and that they were going to end up having to play at Steinbrenner Field or somewhere else for the remainder of the lease time until they get a stadium built somewhere over time. So it is, when you look at it from that point of view, it is central to the Rays potentially staying in the Tampa Bay region
Yeah.
that this happened. Because if not, there's a good chance the new ownership group could have taken them to Montreal, could have taken them here, could have taken them there. There were other cities that would have vied for the Rays at that point. So right now, the good point is that you have them back at the Trop. You have bids into the Tampa side. However, they have burnt the bridge completely in St. Petersburg to any chance of having a deal beyond a lease. They could add a year or two. I'm not saying that isn't possible, but in terms of setting up a new stadium, it seems unlikely that St. Petersburg Council would go through this whole process over again and go, you know what? Like, I think they've had enough. They've just been abused enough as an entity that's vying for this. So it's really now between Tampa, Orlando, and Montreal to me, because Montreal is getting $1 billion roof.
Yeah.
The Orlando side have $1 billion already set up for a whole stadium, and the Tampa side have $1.5 billion they got to sort out and how they come up with in the world's worst economic times we've seen since the 30s.
Jeez.
So think about that for a second. Like you're asking taxpayers for money at a time when they're scratching pennies together for gas, when they're trying to feed their families, when they're trying to make sure they have employment long term, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is not an easy feat. So I strongly believe that Orlando will end up being the place that they end up going with simply
Yeah.
because the money is there and guaranteed, and that this is sort of a false hope offer that they've given to the Tampa side, and that instead it'll be used for developments that help Ken Babby's other endeavors.
Yeah,
Patrick
Zalewski and
Zalewski,
Babby.
yeah,
Yeah, he's the developer, but
right.
it's my gosh. And here's another thing sometimes we forget is those two other professional teams that are here, the Bucks and also the Lightning, they're going to be submitting requests for several $1 million to the county and city as well.
Mhm.
And if you are there with a tight pocketbook and you have to give money to an untried product, being the Rays in Tampa and building something completely new, or just basically shoveling money to an organization where you feel like you're absolutely going to get that. I can see where Hillsborough County and Tampa City, Tampa might say, maybe not so much. We understand we're going to go ahead and support the ones we already have strong ties to that are already generating a lot of income for us.
Yeah, I'm not from Tampa. Like I can't speak for, but the feeling I get having covered the Rays for as long as I have is that they're a very conservative entity in terms of what they will fund business
Yeah.
wise. So in that front, they're not going to be focused on the glamour of having, a bright, shiny object that they happen to have paid $1.5 billion for. Like that's not how they know that they're going to stay elected and in the positions that they have. Now, having said that, the mayor did come out supporting this project in general, not specifically, but kind of dancing around it. But
Yeah.
more specifically, like I said in the Brent Carty show, Mark, there's a lot of apprehension about the silence on the Rays ownership side about how they're going to fund this and why they're only targeting one entity for the funding instead of spreading that request out amongst a whole bunch of different entities.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. These days, it always helps to have instead of just one source. It's just like when
Mhm.
I was in advertising. If I had one great advertiser, it was wonderful. But you know what? If everything dried up there one day and I didn't have other ones in my book, then I was in trouble because it was going to happen. Well, sooner or later, that was going to happen. It was going to dry up. So yeah, it's a little disappointing and not understandable, at least down here in the gutter, down here in the gutter of it all. But so maybe there's some great observations I have, but the God's honest truth is, man, I keep looking back and I say, this does sound like the whole thing with St. Pete, where they weren't talking to one another. There was, back and forth and agree upon one thing and then you find out it's being changed.
Do you remember the Rays 100? Remember that group of 100?
Oh,
And I interviewed, I want to say 20 of them, and none of them knew what the heck was going on. None of them. They were like, we're part of this. We don't know what's expected. We don't have any inside information, blah, 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 blah. It was insane. And I was, when I got that feeling from them, it was like, yeah, they want to be part of things, but in a reasonable sense, not in a take it or leave it. This is the offer, read
yeah,
between the lines on your own time. That's the way it feels constantly with the Rays. And I don't understand why. So having gotten that feeling from the Rays 100 group that I interviewed, I don't feel like there's that thirst to overspend on keeping the Rays around. They're
yeah,
fine the way they are. They'll watch them in Orlando. They'll go visit them. Like they'll and to me, the Rays investments that they're making now in the Trop and everything else, like in terms of improving it, etc. It's about building the fan base for the franchise that they're going to move to Orlando, and then people will travel there to go watch games whenever they do, probably as often as they go to the Trop right now. To be
yeah,
quite honest, it's not going to change much. And TV region wise, if you're in Orlando, you probably own the Tampa area anyway. You inherit that essentially because you're within a couple of hours drive, right? Really, what changes for the Rays? They get the same TV coverage, they get a stadium paid for, and they have the Dreamers, a new fresh page without all the stink about stadiums and everything else, and they get to be closer to Jacksonville, which I know Ken Babby has a affinity for as well.
yeah.
I don't know if you know anything about Patrick Zalewski's investments in the Orlando region. Like, how involved is he in Orlando as compared to Tampa?
I need to look into that because I know he has that whole dream home business, and there's obviously a lot of investment with that. He invested a lot with DeSantis, but as far as actual product and properties, I don't know what he has in Orlando, but he seems like a person who does probably have a broad base when it comes to his own investments in housing and such. I
Hmm.
don't know. We'll see. Me, it's kind of funny. It wouldn't make much difference if it was at the Troppers or Orlando. The travel where I'm located, it's very, very similar. So
That's my point.
yeah.
It's kind of ridiculous, but it is.
Here I am in the middle of Florida, right between Tampa and Orlando, a little closer to Tampa, but I am really in the middle between St. Pete and Orlando. And this Florida has so many people coming here every day. It's a wonder we just haven't completely submerged as a state. If it was a scale where people were being weighed all at once, not to mention we eat well down here. We'll see, my friend, but I can't answer the question. I have to find out more. It's almost worth looking more deeply. I want to look more deeply at that, but the Raise 100 and do maybe look a little retrospective on that. Get a few of those folks that you talked way back when on here and see how they think these days.
Yeah, it might not be a bad idea.
Yeah,
I'd probably be asked to invest, something in boxes, etc. There'll be some sort of commitments the Rays look for as they see how viable the investment is.
yeah,
Uh, So the other thing today is that there's a lot of Rays news of X-rays.
yeah.
Uh, did you see Ben Rortvedt, Vidal Brujan, and Curtis Mead were all designated for assignment by their respective teams? So they're free agents. You know what? I'm not adverse to the Rays signing some of these guys to minor league deals. Like I would like to see Vidal Brujan and Curtis Mead go back with the Durham Bulls and they act as depth pieces that the Rays can draw on. So if Carson Williams struggles, etc., like I wouldn't be opposed to the Rays bringing some of those guys back And then Shane Baz signed that nice 5-year deal. So the Rays had, or sorry, the Rays, the Orioles had given up a huge package to land him. And so now he's getting just over $60 million guaranteed over 5 years.
Mm,
I don't feel the Rays would have ever given him that money. So for him, I'm very happy for him. I know he had a lot of injury related issues that could have brought a lot of question marks. And I guarantee you, Zach Eflin took him aside and said, listen, Shane, maybe you're dreaming about 100 million plus, but let me tell you, as a pitcher that struggled with injuries, there is nothing guaranteed. And
jeez.
so I feel like it's a really solid deal for him. He'll do well with the Orioles, and even if he has an injury, a significant injury at some point, now he's covered. And yeah, it's good for the Orioles to have that now consistent rotation, which is going to be a pain in the butt for the Rays.
I'm glad to hear that about him too. Yeah, that's I'm glad he got some advice there, a little mentoring, because there's no doubt that a lot of players need it. Man, Matt, I tell you, it has been an exciting week, and mentioned a little of this on the Cardi show. I was talking that at the Tampa Baseball Museum last night, seeing, was it Roberto, was it Hernandez, and seeing what the fellow who was like the saver. He had like 300 saves with the Rays, and get to meet him, and that was a true pleasure. Joe Madden was there, Matt Joyce was there, and it was a fun event. They had kind of a panel and they talked, and it was very collegial, but it was also a lot of open and friendly with everyone. Here's a fun little story. I guess I can tell, but Matt had his little daughter there with him, and she was just pleasant as could be. And one of the people there at the event saw that she was thirsty, so they brought her over a little Sprite. She gets a piece of paper and she draws a baseball on the paper. Then she goes to her daddy and says, "Sign this." And then she goes and she takes the paper to the lady who gave her the Sprite.
Oh
Oh,
man, the
yeah.
consciousness that takes about what your dad actually is doing for a living and then how he's approached by other people. I mean, that's an awareness on another level. So she's
Yeah.
got a very high emotional IQ, whoever that is.
Oh, she was amazing, and and she was when everybody else was milling around here and there. She's sitting at a table. She was playing that little cup game. You know how the up and down or whatever the cups and
Mhm.
hand clapping and all that. And I thought, man, if I ever tried to do that, I would be so lost. They'd wind up putting me in a loony bin. But she was a gracious little girl. Matt, I want to give you and your family kudos to raising a wonderful young lady there. So it was a fun event, and he was very pleasant. Everybody was there was very pleasant, and Joe Madden's he's Joe Madden. You look at this guy, and you know how intelligent he is in the game, and he's the man who probably saw more with the shift than a lot of other people did. He saw analytics, but he also trusted his gut and his experience. And those are qualities that aren't necessarily revered all the time these days by some organizations. Uh, some of them want to just come in and say, here's the analytics and here's what you're going to do. And they don't trust the talent. But were you surprised when we saw opening night and we saw the new manager with those two coaches he had, those two, having Bruce Bochy and Dusty Baker there? Were you surprised to see that?
Not really. It's funny that you mentioned that because I'm actually watching right now the box score. The Yankees have blanked the Giants for 2 games now and only allowed 4 hits over those 2 games.
Ooh.
So the Giants are having a really hard start to their season offensively, and it'll be interesting to see what advice they give Tony now and say, you know what, like, do you stick with the same lineup? And knowing old school guys, probably that's what they would say to do. You keep playing the right splits, along the way. You don't keep it the same just because.
Right.
But you have a right-handed lineup, you have a left-handed lineup, yada yada yada. But I feel like this is the kind of time in turmoil
Yeah.
where you're a new manager and then you're facing the Yankees, you haven't scored a run after 2 games, like that little panic button starts to set off a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see how much he's able to tone it down. Like they could go into the next series and win all 3 or win all 4 and go off from there. But it is always tough for a new manager when you're first getting your feet wet. And so I'm happy for him that he has people to support him in the right way. And I know with Buster Posey, he's not going to be the type that adds too much pressure on him right away. He's going to have that steady hand of get it done, do what you need to do to sort yourself out, and trust in the process.
Trust in the process. I like that.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know. So I'm excited about this year. I don't have a whole lot more, to be honest with you. I'm trying to think
I'm
of,
watching the Durham Bulls tonight, Mark.
ooh,
The Rays, I don't know why they don't have a game tonight. So I'm like, you know
geez.
what? The Durham Bulls have their first lineup out, and I want to see Olivares. I want to see the lineup, Trey Morgan and the rest of the guys. And so, if you're a Rays fan and you have MLB TV or a way to watch it, tune in to the Durham Bulls and get a feel for what they have to offer in AAA, including Jacob Melton,
Yeah,
who could be up very early in the season. So, Logan Workman, I think, gets the start tonight, and Brody Hopkins gets the start tomorrow, which is interesting because if Joe Boyle falters in the spot that he's pitching in tomorrow,
right.
Brody Hopkins would be the alternative if ever they needed to make a swap at any point. There's kind of like that synergy between when they're starting for right now. I'm excited to see what they have in Durham and how those guys look. So it's not all about the majors, dig into those minors, guys.
Absolutely. I mean, because that's where the majors come from, and you could probably afford a ticket there too if you're in the market. Oh gosh. Well, as the old trop dissolves behind you, it's we're looking
Getting
for
dark here, Mark. It's getting dark.
well, Matt and I are looking for a great season. We're not expecting playoffs. Who knows what the world holds, but it's going to be an interesting year with new owners. I have great expectations, but the reality I know keeps kicking me in the teeth and saying, Mark, that ain't going to happen. So thank you. And we'll have some more fun stuff to talk about as this progresses and gets through this first series with the Cardinals. But go back and watch the Durham Bulls, my friend. That sounds good.
Sounds good, Mark, and have a good rest of your week. And hopefully, we have a lot of good highlights. I'll try to focus on positives in the next time we meet up because I don't want this to be a doom and gloom season. I want this to be a highlighting potential gems that we're unearthing.
There you go. I like that. That's a good approach, my friend. It's a good way to live, period. So, well, thank you all again for joining us here today, and we will catch up with you again real soon.
If you enjoyed this show, go ahead, like and subscribe to Baseball Biz on Deck. You may also find Baseball Biz on Deck on YouTube, at iHeart Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, and at baseballbizondeck.com. Also, you can find Matt at matgermain.bskysocial. That's Matt at matgermain.bskysocial, or Mark at baseballbizondeck.bskysocial and Baseball Biz on Deck with Facebook.
Bong.